Good morning, everybody. So this morning we're going to be talking about how to make a radiator cover like this out of wood. Basically, you got to imagine this thing having a top being painted white, and there's going to be some decorative screen in it. But today we're going to be talking about how to make the frame of the thing using some common and some not so common shop tools. All right, so clearly the first thing you want to do before you start one of these projects is measure your radiator. See how long the damn thing is. Look for these little pipe connections and make sure you leave enough space to accommodate them. The last thing you want to do is finish one that'll fit, except not over this little little pipe fitting here. I'm going to make mine to fit over this granite strip that's already on top because it diffuses the heat really nicely. A lot of people wonder whether making these things, a radiator cover out of wood, is safe, and it absolutely is, because these radiators can't get much hotter than the boiling point of water, so they're certainly not going to start the wood on fire. What you are going to want to make sure is that you get kiln-dried or pressure-treated wood, because otherwise when this thing dries the wood out, there's a chance that your structure could warp. Anyway, so measure first and measure often, as we like to say. Alright, so before we get started on any woodworking project, I want to talk about dust control. Wood dust isn't as bad as like asbestos or coal dust or anything, but it's not pretty when you get a wood dust related pulmonary condition or cancer. So I like to have a nice strong dust collection system set up behind all of my tools. So what I got is this big old Reliant 2 horsepower 220 volt son of a bitch, and I've got it hooked up to this Cyclone that I got from Oneida Air Systems, which is just fucking awesome, and that mounted on top of a 55-gallon drum, which I got for like $40 delivered on eBay, which just seems ridiculous. I know you can get them cheaper locally, but like the mailman brought it to my door and I didn't have to do fucking anything. And then I've got it hooked up to these two HEPA filters. I forget where these come from. If you look on any dust collection forum, you'll see mention of them. It was kind of a bitch building the manifolds and everything to use them with this system. But anyway, so I've got all this ductwork that goes back behind all the different tools and places where I sand, and you know, behind the sweet fucking bandsaw, and this Delta contractor saw, which I've done a review on in another video. And then over to the routing area where we're also going to be working today. It's kind of a pain in the ass to set up with all this PVC pipe and whatnot, but once you get it set up, it's pretty damn sweet. I mean, I wish I would have done this, years ago. And then for ambient, dust floating around in the air that doesn't get caught by this system, I have this real nice jet ceiling-mounted filtration system. But even with all of that stuff, I still wear a respirator when I'm working with wood in the basement because it's a restricted air system. I like these 3M style respirators with N95 inserts. You definitely want to get the N95 inserts because otherwise you're still breathing in fine particulate. And I always wear ear and eye protection when I'm down here. I know, shock of all shocks. If you've watched any of my other videos, I know it doesn't seem like I take any precautions, but I got a kid now, so I have to live forever. Anyway. So off topic, but I'm going to give you a little demonstration of why you want a Cyclone if you're going to build a serious dust collection system. So we're going to throw this beer cap through the system and see what happens. Alright, so you notice we didn't hear any crashes when that went through the impeller of the main dust collector, and that's really the point of this, to separate heavy stuff out and anything that goes through by accident. So the beer cap's in the barrel now, and not, fucking up my motor. So while we're on the topic of safety, you can't operate power tools without being mildly inebriated. You have to have a little bit of beer on board to be well hydrated. I like Sam Adams' Boston Lager. It's really one of my favorite all-time beers, like super malty, real nice hop character, goes down easy. I used to drink these on the, the commuter boat back from work when I was 16, and they are just absolutely fantastic. So I really recommend this beer. So we're going to be building these radiator covers out of two different kinds of wood. We're going to be using 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch kind of square posts for the main support. And then we're going to be using this thinner, I think it's 0.75 inch by 5 inch by 8 foot piece planks of pine. I didn't get the select grade pine because we're just going to paint over it anyways. Pine's super light wood, super easy to work with. We're going to be doing some routing, so it's great for that. I could have bought the 1.5 by 1.5 inch square posts in pine also, but they're like $10 for an 8 foot segment. So what we're going to do is we're going to use these 2x4s, which are like $2.50 a piece, and we are going to cut our 1.5 inch posts out of this wood on the table saw because it's just ridiculous how much they charge for the pine square posts. So here's something that pisses me off. Stapling on the fucking like UPC code on the lumber, like oh, just why don't you just mar the whole thing up and just like smear a handprint of feces on the surface? Like, these things are dick to pull out. If you forget them out, they ruin your tools. Like, why don't they just use stickers? It just boggles my mind. All right, so here's what we're going to be cutting to begin with. We're going to be doing these 2x4 square legs I told you about that are going to be. We're going to need 5 legs. They're going to be about 23 inches tall. And the reason we're going to make them we're going to make them 24 inches tall, sorry. And then we're going to need 2 73.5 inch kind of supports that are going to go in the back where we can't see them to hold the box together while we're putting the front on. Then we're going to be making these pine, these are going to be like the decorative sides of the box that are also going to hold the aluminum screen. So we're going to need 4 of the long ones in front. We're going to need 4 23 inch by 3 inch ones. Those are also going to be in the front. The reason why they're 1 inch shorter is so that the feet have a little bit of distance off the ground, so this isn't just like sitting right there on the floor, so you can actually, get under there and dust. And then for the sides, we're going to have these 12-inch ones that are going to be the spanners. So basically, we're going to end up with a box that has 72 inches by 12 inches of interior space that we can put over the radiator. And there's going to be about, an inch or two of clearance on the top to fit over the top of the radiator and that piece of granite we talked about. So when you're cutting, making your miter cuts on the boards to begin with, you don't need to be super exact in your measurements as long as you use some sort of jig to make sure that every time you cut this same piece, it's the exact same dimension. So what I do is I clamp on these pieces of wood to the end of the miter saw, and I set a stop. So that every time I want to cut a 36-inch piece, I know that it's going to be maybe not 36 inches, but it's going to be the exact same length as the other one. So this is really useful when you're doing this, just to make sure that they're all exactly the same. Alright, so here's all the mitered lumber we're going to be using. These are going to be the thicker front panels. These are going to be the thinner side panels, so we need about half as many of them because we're going to be able to get 2 per board. These are going to be the square legs I talked about, and this is going to be the support that goes in the back. I'll cut this into 2 1.5 by 1.5 by 73.5 inch supports. Okay? And don't get rid of the cutoff lumber that you're making so far, because we're going to be able to make some joist or supports from that, like right angle supports to keep this thing rigid. So when you're buying a table saw, if you don't already have one, I feel like the fence has got to be the most important part of the whole thing. Like, I don't care how many horsepower your table saw has. If you can't set a distance from the blade and have it be perfectly parallel for cutting stuff like this, then you might as well just go stick your dick in a wood chipper. I mean, this table saw was not that expensive, but the fence is amazing. Like, if I set this for 3 inches, which I have it now, every one of these damn things will be exactly 3 inches when I measure it with the tape measure, unless I fucked up on the, like, lining up the scale here, like if I was drunk. So we're going to cut all of our 3-inch pieces now. Just run them through the table saw. Be careful. I'm going to be using, of course, a push tool, because I don't want to be sticking my fingers in between the fence and there when it's so narrow. Those of you who have watched my other assembly instructions for the saw may recognize some of the new additions. The router table addition is one of those. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then this dust collection system, obviously I've upgraded it significantly so that there's less dust, shooting in my face off the end of the blade, which doesn't effectively get taken care of by the in-cabinet dust collection system. The one thing I don't like about this saw so far is the fact that it only has this little 2.5-inch pussy dust collection vent. So it really puts a lot of strain on the dust collector motor, because it's like sucking through a straw or a snorkel that's deep underwater. But other than that, some people have been asking me to talk about this saw some more, and it's great. I've made a lot of little projects with it. It's never failed me, so I love it. I want my videos to be all inclusive, and I realized I just left the ladies out. So as I was saying, if you don't have a fence that you can make straight cuts with, you might as well stick your dick / pussy into a wood chipper. Alright, so here's all our cut parts. The 3-inch parts, the 2-inch parts. Here's our 1.5-inch square ones that we cut from the 2x4. So you can see they're pretty nice. And they only cost like 20 cents a piece compared to the $2 a piece that it would cost if we were to cut these from one of the pine ones that they already have pre-cut at Home Depot. If you just look at my... look at all the dust that's on my chest from doing that. Even with all that dust collection, there's still a bunch of fine dust stuck to me. And that's why you're going to want to have the ambient air filter if you're going to be doing a lot of woodworking at home. So it's going right now. It pulls all the dust out of there really nicely. We had a bunch of smoke down here the first time we fired up our oil furnace after the summer. Set off the smoke detector. I turned on the ambient air filter and the smoke detector shut off in 10 seconds. It's really, really effective. Alright, so the next thing we're going to be doing is routing to put a decorative edge on those pine pieces that are going to be supporting the screen whenever we get the decorative screen. Nice thing about having a table saw with a good fence and a table extension is you can build a nice little fence for your router that clips straight onto the the main fence, so you can have a really nice, accurate, parallel router fence. It's a little dark over here, but you can see we got a space between these two boards where the dust will get sucked up. Here's our bit. We're going to be using like an OG Quadra Cut that I got from, I forgot who makes these, but it's really, really nice. And then these feather boards, which help hold the work item down while it's going through the router, so you don't get weird wobble in the pattern, and it's all nice and straight. These make a tremendous amount of dust, so you definitely want to have dust collection for a router. And I've got a huge router motor mounted under here. It's like an old Porter cable 3 horsepower. I would not want to hold this in my hand and freehand this, so it's really nice to have a table for this reason. I also hook it up to this, it's kind of like a rheostat. It modulates the amount of current that goes to the router motor and controls its speed. I always set it for, whatever speed it will make the cut without bogging down, but not any faster, because some of these bits that get a little wide, I worry that if it hit an imperfection or if I left a staple in there and it shattered, that it would just, fucking macerate me. Yeah, so basically when you're setting your fence for these router bits, you basically want that little round guide ball or guide bearing on the top to be just barely visible or invisible as you line the fence up. And when you crank it down, I usually do it so that the bearing is not visible at all, because otherwise on the corners of your board will get a little bit more cut into by the router bit than will the rest of it that has a chance to interact with the roller. All right, next step is we're going to connect the routed kind of front and side panels to the legs. The routed part's going to be facing out, so I like to have this little indent here, and eventually the decorative screen is going to be nailed to the back of these or stapled to the back of these. So I like to attach them to the legs first because I find it easier to assemble than if you assemble the whole frame and then try and nail it to the legs. So what you're going to do is you're going to drill guide holes for the nails and then countersink them. So there's a nice little divot for the nail head to go into. So I drill the holes and countersink on all of these before I even start putting it together, so I don't have to switch around the drill bits like a million times. Alright, we got all our holes pre-drilled and countersunk, and this is on the vertical members, so the 23-inch members, these are the ones we're going to attach first. So I set a block at the end of the bench here so that I can shove this up against a hard stop when I drive the nail into this hole so it's not sliding all over the place. I'm going to line the entire underside of this with glue, so this is going to be relatively permanent. Once you have this nail set, then you can go ahead and bang that one in and it won't move around like it would otherwise. I'm using these kind of fasteners. It doesn't matter what brand, but the ones with the little ribs that'll hold, because you know this is something that might get sat on a lot, and if you use regular nails, it's just going to squeak and everything. You could use screws, but I find it much more difficult to put together, and the screws have a tendency, even with pre-drilled holes, to crack this pine. So you're better off using nails for this, and once they're painted over, they're more aesthetically pleasing anyways. You won't have to fill them in with putty or anything. Alright, something to keep in mind while you're assembling this is how the finished product is going to look. So you got to be really careful before you nail anything together that all of the routed edges are facing out, and that both of your decorative pieces or pine mitered parts are set back in from the outside edge, because you're going to be really pissed off if you've glued and nailed something in the wrong orientation. You also want to remember that on the other side, say this is the left corner leg, this won't work as a right corner leg because the routs are facing the wrong direction. So you have to make sure, okay, plan this out when you do it. This is going to be the left corner leg. Then you want to plan out what's going to be your left back leg, your right forward leg, your left back leg, so that all of these things are in the right orientation, because they're not mirror images of each other, and because we've built it this way where there's a little bit of a foot on the bottom, they can't just be flipped upside down and used in the other orientation. So be really careful when you're putting this together and plan everything out ahead of time. Alright, so when you're done putting these the first verticals on, this is what you should have. So you've got this is your side, this will be the front, this leg goes in the middle of the span, and you can see it's got a vertical riser on either side set back from the front. And then this is the other leg, or the other corner anyways. You can see it's basically the mirror image of that other side. So then you're going to want to start putting together your horizontals to hold the thing together. And I find it easiest to put the long ones on first because they're the most finicky. So the big spanners in the front, and do it one side at a time and then join them together. So we're going to be using all the cutoffs from making our faceboards to size, down to 3 inches and 2 inches respectively. We're going to be using all these to make the supportive diagonals for the frame. So we're not really wasting anything here. All right, so as you're putting this together, I find it helpful to add these diagonal cross members, 45 degrees cross members as you go, to keep the structure stiff, because even if you have these joints glued up and set, they still have a tendency to come apart as you're hammering. You may get a slight bit of overlap on some of the pieces because of warping, or because it's really difficult to put these together perfectly square, but don't worry about that because we can sand all that and plane that out later so that it's nice and flat. So go ahead and get somewhere nice and steady, nice work surface where you can step on this thing and really hold it down as you're nailing. Drill pilot holes for all the nails just to make sure you don't split anything, because otherwise you make more work for yourself. Alright, so you can kind of see the order I'm assembling this in. You prioritize the frame made out of the 2x4 pieces and the cross members first to stiffen it up, and that'll make it easier to put together. It's got to look like you're building a fucking bridge for the most part, because you're going to need all these cross members, because basically you've got a big hollow wooden box made out of very light, very thin wood. So it needs to be very stiff if people are going to sit on it, which they will regardless of whether you want them to or not. So the last part of the assembly is going to be putting on the additional decorative, I guess, front plates, and then shoring them up. And then after that we'll be painting, putting on the top piece of plywood, painting again, and then installing the screens when they get here. Alright, so here's the more or less finished product. This is for a 72-inch radiator. Just want you to see where all the struts are placed in here. This cross member that's kind of nailed to the bottom here with no support in the middle is because the radiator has to go straight through the middle, so we can't put another support in between here as much as I would like to. So just showing you where all the cross members are. I shortened up a few of the ones here so that it would fit over the top of the radiator and on this side. So now basically all we got to do is fill in the gaps in the front. Alright, so as you can see, most of these miter joints are pretty tight, but a few of them have some little cracks in them, and that's just, you buy kind of soft lumber, cheaper lumber, because this is just going over a radiator, and that's what you get. It warps a little bit. So we're going to fill those in with a wood filling compound. I'm going to use this stuff, which is actually for filling in holes in floors, but it's really easy to work with. We'll be able to fill those cracks, and hopefully when it's all painted over, you won't even be able to tell that they're there. Alright, so here's what it's looked like when you got it all smeared into the cracks. So this stuff is real easy to wash off before it dries, and once it dries, it's real easy to sand. So it's pretty great. So just use it to fill in any of your cracks unless you don't really care. And then give it about a day, and a little bit longer than a day if you put it in thick in any areas to raise the level. And then we'll sand it down. We'll do the same for the two ends here if there are any appreciable cracks. And then we'll be ready to sand and paint. Okay, so we're moving on to some of the final steps of the procedure. You can see I have not sanded down these joints yet. But I have attached the tops. So the tops are just made out of, I think it's 3/8 inch or 15/16 sanded plywood. I've attached them mostly with wood screws, but also with some nails into the thinner components to make sure not to split them. And that gives it a lot of solidity. Once you've got it, once you have the tops on, it gets much more rigid. So now we're going to sand these things down prior to painting, because I don't know how many projects like this you've done before, but if you don't sand wood like this, rough wood, it looks like shit when it's painted. I mean, you can tell, you can see all the grain, and it just looks like crap. We're going to be using this little Makita sander, which is ridiculously nice. I used it for sanding the entire outside of the house when I was painting. The dust bag connection actually also fits a 2.5 inch dust hose, so you can hook it up to a shop vacuum cleaner. Or in my case, I actually have it, kind of roughly plumbed into my dust collection system. Okay, so they're all sanded down now and ready for paint. So the last thing I'm going to do is wipe them down with a wet rag, let them dry, and then it's paint time. Okay, so you can see now we got the things painted up. I didn't bother to paint the inside and the backs where no one's going to see for obvious reasons. I sealed up these nail heads with wood glue, and then just paint it over them. And the rust won't bleed through when you do that. So you're going to want to get some of this decorative metal screen crap. They sell it at Home Depot, but they never have it in stock. And honestly, if you buy this direct from the manufacturer, it's like 3 times as expensive as if you just buy it from Home Depot and wait for them to deliver it. Takes for goddamn ever, but once it gets here, you know, it's in fairly nice shape and it's cheap. You're going to want to cut it to size with tin snips, and then we're going to use a regular staple gun to hook it into the back side of these pine boards. And it's going to become real apparent why we use pine boards for these, because it's going to be super easy to get a full depth staple in there. Whereas if we used a harder wood, we would probably have to use you know, small nails or a heavier duty staple gun or a finish gun to get deep enough so that the screens would hold. Okay, so we're going to put the screen in this one first. Now that we're into the final assembly, we want to make sure that we're well hydrated. I like Founders All Day IPA. Smooth, refreshing, just the right amount of bitterness and hoppiness in there. Real fresh, like fresh leaf or green grass type of flavor from the hops. Not too much alcohol, so you can drink it all day long and all night. Very attractive can, comes in a 15 pack for about $18. I mean, you really can't go wrong. Founders All Day IPA. Drink your face off. Okay, so it's not a perfect fit, so I had to do a little bit of trimming. But you can see what I did here on one end is make a little tab to flip up to get around one of these, you know, support joists. That way we don't waste too much material. We still have plenty of room to connect staples to this, connect it all to the frame, and I didn't do too much cutting, so it's all nice and square. And I actually, this is something I probably should have mentioned in the beginning of the video. I designed these, all the measurements so that these screens would fit perfectly, so that I wouldn't have to square it up. So yeah, probably should have mentioned that earlier, but anyway. So you're going to go ahead and trace the shape that worked for the other side onto the next piece so that you don't have to do so much measuring and dicking around. Alright, so there's one side done. Looks pretty sweet. Now, I just realized this metal is so thin you can actually staple through it, so that's great. I wouldn't recommend this staple gun that I have, heavy duty. I'm not sure who makes it. Looks like Arrow Fastener Core. I'd say for every one staple it shot, like 3 fell out. Kind of a piece of crap. At one point, just like staple shot all out the front of it instead of out the back where they're supposed to come. So I think it might have been made by Lithonia or something, like just a real piece of crap. So get a good staple gun. So if you have pipes coming out the wall, coming out the side of your radiator and going directly into the wall rather than diving down into the floor, you're going to need to leave a little door for them to go through. So as you can see on here, I've cut a little gap. And this is actually facing the wall, so no one will actually see it. So I didn't do a great job of it. But with this little door, what you're going to do is you're going to trace out how big you want it to be, cut right up the middle, and then fold these guys over so you don't leave any sharp edges. So when you get to the top, what you're going to do is cut across the top here too, fold, fold, fold. And that way there won't be any sharp edges. If you're, you know, most people make a radiator cover because they have kids. So if they stick their grubby little fingers in there, they're not going to get cut. And if you have kids, you know that their goal in life seems to be to try and get taken away by Child Protective Services, either by touching stuff, falling off stuff, eating stuff, you know, grabbing animals by things, and then being surprised at the consequences. So anyway. Okay, so here's what it looks like all folded up now. You can see that these are nice round edges, with the exception of this little peg here that we had to cut at the top. So I just sanded those down, and now they're, you know, they're nice and burr-free. So if the kid does get his hand in here, it'll be fine. From the front, it doesn't look great, but remember this is going to be facing the wall. So it's pretty good for what it is. You can try flattening it down a little bit more if you want, but what you want to avoid doing is bending it so far that it breaks, because then you really defeated the purpose. As you know, aluminum really can't be bent back into shape once it's deformed. But you know, I think that for facing the wall, that looks pretty fucking good. So we're going to install this. Like seriously, look at all these frickin' staples that came out. These just pop out like every time I press the goddamn handle. Like, what the fuck? You know, like, I'm blowing my entire budget on staples here. Anyway, that's all hooked in now. So we'll do the front panel, and for that, I got some bigger stock. So this stuff is 24 by 36 inches, so it should fit in there pretty nice. Might have to cut it down a little bit, but there should be much less modification. Judging by how many staples I used on these two sides, I'm going to need like another 5 boxes of staples, but anyway, it's starting to look pretty good. Now, the edges of this stuff can be, you know, mighty sharp. I'm getting pretty cut up doing this. And I would put on gloves, but I'm too macho. So, I mean, if you feel like putting on gloves, you can go right ahead. But, you know, I'll be disappointed, and probably so will America. Anyways. Okay. So there's the front. All done. So this one is complete. All you have to do now is plunk it over your radiator and you're all set. Kids can't get in there. Pets can't get in there. The dust will stay in there forever, I assume. But yeah, pretty nice little project. So once again, this stuff is sharp. But, you know, I'm going to have to reiterate that, you know, I'm too much of a boss to wear gloves. So, you know, I wouldn't wear any white clothing while you're doing this. But, you know, things are going well. Alright, there's the final one. All finished. Looks pretty baller, if I don't say so myself. Shed a little blood, shed a few tears, but all in all, not too hard of a little project, not too expensive. I think total cost to build the both of those was probably like $100. The screens, obviously the most important, you know, expensive part. After the beers. You know, the beers help keep your hands steady for when you're putting these together. But yeah, I mean, if this doesn't slip over the top of the radiator upstairs, I'm gonna fucking lose it. Probably destroy it. But I have a good feeling it will, because I did all my measurements. So, hope you enjoyed this video, and if you don't appreciate my language, I'd appreciate it if you didn't fucking complain about it in the comment section. Good afternoon.